Yes. So in this video, we will discuss about Python functions, and I'm going to create multiple parts with respect to Python functions and how to create functions and how to call the functions and how to use function arguments like that. I'll be creating multiple videos, not just one video. This is part one. In this part, I'll discuss about how to create functions and call it, and what are the different things I've given, defining function, calling functions, returning values, returning multiple values, and writing some function documentation. All these things will be covered as part of this video. Okay, let us see this. Functions used to create reusable block of code. So you can write, let's say if you have 10 lines of code, if you keep those 10 lines of code in a for loop, so that 10 lines of code gets executed based on the looping. That means how many times that loop executes, those many number of times the 10 lines of code gets executed. But when it comes to functions, if we keep the 10 lines of code within function, you can reuse that function wherever you want. So after you have created, you can reuse that function wherever you have created. So how are we going to do that? So functions are defined by using diff keyword, define, right? And here I wanted to create a function which will find an odd number. Let's say I'm creating find odd, and I'm specifying, you can create parameters or you don't need to create parameters. This is optional. Let's say I'm not creating any parameter here. Okay. And this is the syntax. And now I'm going to specify here, if let's say I wanted to find 5 is an odd number or not. 5 percentile 2 is equals to 1, and this is odd number. Print 5 comma is odd number, is odd number. So I'm specifying that. Okay, now else block. Okay, and again print, and 5 comma is not odd number, or no, 5 is an even number, something like that. I need to specify, or here I'm specially going with a number, so I'm specifying is not odd number, like that I'm specifying. Okay, fine. So now this function works only with 5. This function works only with 5. How to call it? And you should not call before defining a function. You should not call this before defining a function. If you call it, you get an error, right? You have to call the function only after defining it. So now I'm executing it. So how many times you execute, those many times it gets executed. So you can call it wherever you want. So this is the advantage of function. So I'm reusing that code. I'm reusing the code what I have written. So I called for 3 times. So it printed 5 is odd number, odd number, odd number, like that. It printed for 3 times. So now I don't want to call, I don't want it to work only with 5. I want it to work with whatever the number I pass. So that's why I can pass a number here. So I will replace that with n right here, like this. I am going to replace, and I will specify n is something like even number, n is an even number, something like that. I will specify, right? So now, and I call find odd. If you don't pass a value, it's failed. Says that missing one required positional argument. Okay, I'll talk about it. No need to worry about it. Okay, positional argument. Okay, so now here I'll pass 10 right here. So it is going to give me 10 is odd number, or I'll pass 15. 15 is odd number or even number. Okay, like that it is going to give the result. So this is how you can able to call a function. This is how you can able to call a function. You can create a function and you can call a function. And if you wanted to create some documentation for this function, I am mouse hovering on it, and by default this is returning null value. Okay, I'll tell you how to customize it. But for now, when I mouse over, this is not showing any documentation what this function does, right? So what this function does, what we can do is we can specify here. I told you initially we can create multi-line strings by using triple quotes, right? And if you write the same thing here, and by default this is going to become the documentation for help, right? The documentation for help. So here what I'm doing is I'll specify this, I'll specify documentation. This function gives prints prints a number is odd or even. Okay, that's what I'm giving. And then parameter n. So what you wanted to pass at parameter n, you can specify an integer, right? An integer. Okay, you can specify that and returns, and this does not return anything. So by default, every function returns none. You can customize that. We can return some other value as well. So now, whenever I mouse over on a function, so now this function prints a number, uh, uh, prints a number is odd or even, and the parameter n, right? There is only one parameter, an integer, and returns none. So it is giving all the information, right? So this is how, even when you go for a print or something like that, print is a function. This is a built-in function. What we have written is what we have created here is a user-defined function, but print is already a function that is created by Python. This is a built-in function, right? When I mouse over, even even they have also created the same thing, and you can see that it is a built-ins. You can see that, right? We will discuss about all these things, but for now, just remember, this is how you can able to create help document, right? Triple quotes is used to specify help document. Okay, fine. So next one. So can we pass multiple values to a function? Yes, you can happily pass multiple functions, no issue, right? So I'm creating one more function, let's say demo add, and then I will specify a comma b, right? A comma b, and then I'm specifying print a plus b. So let me write print a plus b. So I'm going to call this function demo add. Again, the you need to remember that, okay, the tab is important. If you use one more tab here, this demo call is part of demo add. You don't get any error. That becomes a recursive function. We will talk about that later, right? You don't get an error, but remember, if you call within that function call by itself, and when you execute, by default it will not get called, and so you will confuse that, why it is not calling, something like that. So remember about tab space, right? So do not give it. Like, here I'm passing 10 comma 20, so it is going to add it and then print that value, right? So you can pass any number of parameters you want. Now you get it out. So I'm passing some values. So we have a concept of uh, uh, by value and by reference in other languages. Is it the same concept here as well? So by val and by ref, something like that. Do we have something like that? When it comes to no Python or some other languages as well, uh, in some languages we can specify, okay, this is a reference variable or this is a value variable, something like that. But here objects are by reference, and that too, if you're completely changing the value, that becomes by val, in fact, right? If you're completely changing the reference, that becomes by reference, by value. So I'll show you that. So here I'm calling the function with 10 and 20. It gives us the result. So let me show you how it works when I pass the values, some x equal to 10 and then y equals to 20, right? And then I'm calling demo add x comma y, right? I'm passing these values to inside of the function. Let's assume that I'm changing the value of x inside of function. Okay, let's say I'm changing it to 100, and then after completion of calling, I'm trying to print the value of x. This should remain same as 10, right? Because the where I changed the value inside of inside of demo add, right? There should not be any effect here. So let us see this one. Let us see this one and run. So here the value remains same, that is 10, right? That is 10, right? So there is no change in value. So let us do this one, x equal to 50. I'll give, so that because both are 10, right? Okay, that's why I'm giving you 50. So you can see I'm printing value x, so it is not changing. And let me also print the value of x from function, print x, and then I will also give x from function. Okay, x from function, and here I'll give x from from global. I'll give. Right. So now you can see there is no problem you get. So the change what you did within the function is not affected, right? The changes what you did within function is not affected. So we will discuss more on this in future, but for now what you have to remember is, so the variable values, if you pass any plain variable kind of stuff, it is going to become right by val, not by reference. Okay, so few people, if you don't know about by val and by reference, I will create a separate video which will explain specially by val and by ref, but for now just remember, okay, Python by default it is not going to, okay, if you have any kind of plain value, that is going to be by val, right? And let's say if I'm passing a list or something like that, list, any collection kind of thing, right, data structure kind of thing, then that becomes by ref. Inside of that you can change whatever you want, right? Okay, fine. So the next one is, how to call function. And yes, so you need to call function only after it is created, only after it is created. If you call it before it is created, then you get an error. Got it? So that's one thing, and you should follow that. Now how many parameters you have created, and those many values you must pass. If you don't pass the value, you get an error. So that's compulsory, right? And next one, how to return values. So here I'm not returning any value. Okay, let me try to return the values, right? So for now I'll remove this one. You can practice on your own, and I will talk about it later. Okay, now, so I don't want to print it, I wanted to return the data of it. So I will just use a keyword called return. I will just use a keyword called return. So now what will happen? Okay, I don't want to use it. So now what will happen when we execute it? It is not going to print 30. So why? Because I'm not taking this value. Okay, I have to take that value. Let's say some r is equals to, I'm taking that return value, and then print r, it is printing the value, right? So now when I use return a plus b, so the value gets returned from this function, and then that returns to a variable. You can use it, that returns to a variable and you can use it, right? So it doesn't matter what value it returns. So it may return a single value or multiple values or a list of values. Okay, whatever it is, right? It depends on what value you return. That value will be there inside of R, right? So let's say write a function, write a function to return uh, odd numbers between range, odd numbers between range. So let's say if this is the case, between range, if this is the case, how are you going to write a function? So as usual, I'll specify diff get odd numbers, right? And then here I'll specify, so between a range, so I'll specify r start and then r end, and then we'll see this, right? We'll see this, how are we going to work with it? So I have to use a function, that I have to use a for loop. So this for loop starts from what? For I or n in, I need to specify range, right? I need to specify range, and then r start. So I need to specify that, okay, range r start comma r end plus 1, so that's required, right? So you already know how to create for loop, right? So now here I wanted to find every time whether that n is an odd number or not. Okay, if I will specify n percentile 2 is equals to 1. So if it is equals to 1, then what I have to do? I need to return odd numbers. So how do I return? So if I have to use just return keyword and then n, so what about other number? Return becomes the last executable statement. Return becomes the last executable statement. So what will happen if I just use return? What will happen? So let us see what will happen, right? So return becomes the last executable statement. Return becomes the last executable statement, right? So now I am using get odd numbers of, I'm giving 10 comma 20, and let's print it, and let us see that what it gives us. So it is giving 11, and after that, no, it's not giving it. Why? If return is executed, that's it. This becomes the last executable statement in a function. right? After that, if you write anything, after that, if you write anything, right? Some x equal 100. After that, if you write anything, this becomes unreachable code, right? This becomes unreachable code, and that's it. After that, you will not get anything. So let's say I'm writing print. This is after written. I will specify that. And then let's see whether this gets executed or not. Is it executed? No, it's not executed. Why? The return is the last statement. That's it. After return is executed, no, nothing gets executed. That's what. Return. So you may write return. Return leaves the current function call and with the list as none as written value, because it's just giving all of its official documentation. In simple words, what return does? Return returns the value what we specified, and that's it. After that, nothing gets executed. After that, nothing gets executed. Even if you write this in if condition or in for loop or wherever you write it, right? It doesn't matter where you write it, right? Okay, what happened? And okay, first time it is returning, okay, after completion of for, and where it is executing here, right? Just wait, where it is executing. This is after return. This is after return, right? Okay, first time the first number is going to be 10, right? 10 is not an odd number, so that's why it is executed. And when it comes to 11, okay, 11 is odd number, right? So return is executed. So first time return is not executed, that's why this statement got executed. That's it. So nothing other than that. Okay, so even if you write anywhere, so only for the first time it is executed. But once return is executed, you will not see that. Once return is executed, you will not see that, right? So here I have given after completion of for loop. So because after this for loop, in for loop itself, there is return, that's why it is not executed, right? So this is what you have to remember. Then how to return multiple values? That's when you can create an array, right? A list, right? So I'm giving some anything you can create, anything you can create. And then here what I'm going to do is, instead of simply using return here, instead of doing that, I'm going to specify here odd dot. So we know that how to append value, right? Odd dot append end, right? So automatically one by one value gets appended to odd, right? After completion of for loop, after completion of for loop, what we can do is we'll specify return. After completion of for loop, we'll specify return odd, right? That should be fine. So now let's see how many it gets printed. And it is printing 11, 13, 15, 17, 19, like that. It printed everything, right? So this is what you have to remember when it comes to returning multiple values. Okay, storing values in a list and then returning all those values. So this is possible. So return, if return executed, and after that nothing gets executed. Return is the last executable statement within a function. That's what you have to remember. Return is the last executable statement within a function. Okay. Now, so sorry. Okay. So what else? What else we have? So we know how to return the values, and we know how to return multiple value. Okay, right? And how to create documentation, right? So this is all we discussed, right? Understood. And of course, there is a small change. So what we are doing here, we are passing the range here. Why do I need to pass range here? Why can't we directly use that here itself, right? Instead of using this, I will directly use something like some custom RC, something like that I'm using, right? I will use that RC here for each in RC, right? Can't I specify directly here, right? I will specify here range, right? And here I am going to specify 21. So will that be okay? Let's see how it works. The same thing, the same result. So I don't need to again write range here. I don't need to increase the number of parameters. I can directly pass a different kind of parameter. Here I passed a parameter that is the type is range, right? So this is how we can able to uh, optimize code. Okay, that is required. This is how we can able to optimize coding, right? Yes. So next video we will discuss about some more things like parameters, keyword arcs, all these stuff.